In this one I will talk about enemy behavior and explain how I'm doing it. So here at GameMaker we have the object melee enemy 1 is this little guy right here, and I'm going the step event, and here we have the finite state machine I set up to manage the enemy behavior. We got a switch state here, and each case of the switch state is a different enemy state that governs his behavior. So we have the basic alert state, and we can expand it to see he's basically still here and just waiting for the trigger to change to the enemy chase state. It happens when the player gets near. So I measure the distance to the player with the point distance function, and if he gets within 200 pixels, I don't know if this is pixels, but if he gets within 200, he changes to the enemy chase state. And the enemy chase state, the enemy gets a speed and a direction, and he moves towards the player. I measure the direction he has to move with the point direction function, and he moves towards the object player X and object player Y. And if he gets even closer, now within 50 of the player, it triggers another change of state. Then he goes to the melee attack state phase. And in this attack state, I divided the attack state in 3 different phases because it's a lunging attack. So the first phase, he is coiling and preparing and establishing the direction he will lunge. He will leap forward in the direction of the player. Is the pre-melee attack state. In the melee attack state, he is the lunge itself, and the after melee attack state is the landing of the lunge, and it's in this state that is created the melee enemy 1 damage object. This is a script that creates the object, and this object is an invisible object, but it's this object that when collides with the player, it hurts the player and knockbacks the player and takes away hit points from the player. So this damage object is created here in this state right after the enemy lands, and the object only lasts for a frame, so he only hits the player once. And this is the basic cycle of behavior from alert to chase and to attacking. And a cool little addition I made recently is this other state, the enemy adjust position state, because I was having the problem with just this basic cycle here, that if the player because right after the enemy attack, he usually landed within this distance here, so he would chain another attack right away. And this isn't necessarily bad, but what would happen is that if the player got in like a certain blind spot from the enemy attack, the enemy would just leap back and forward, and the player could stand still in the middle of these leaps, these attacks, and he wouldn't be hit, and the enemy would be leaping back and forth like mindlessly. It looked fake and not very interesting, and looked dumb. So I made this addition. Is a simple addition of the enemy adjust position state. Is that it's just a simple condition that after the attack, to see if the attack is done, I use the animation end event. This is a special event in GameMaker that it triggers something when the animation ends. So for instance, after the animation for the melee attack state is done, after this case is fulfilled, it triggers the change of state to the enemy adjust position state. This is the state I just talked about, that he adjusts his position after the attack. So when he enters the enemy adjust position state, if he is within 50 pixels from the player, he will adjust his position, so to avoid that problem of leaping back and forward and not hitting the player. So he will have a bit of speed, and direction will be opposite. The minus 180 means that he will move the opposite direction from the player, and he will adjust his position and make an attack. If he is not within 50 pixels from the player, he will just go back to the enemy alert state and go back to the basic cycle of being alert, chasing, and attacking. And the result of this is that it avoids that problem of the blind spot, and it also looks more natural that after the enemy attacks he makes a little adjustment. So this is the basic cycle of the enemy attack, of this enemy attack. Different enemies will have a bit different behaviors, but this is the standard melee enemy. This will be his basic behavior. And there's also the hit stun state, enemy dead state, and enemy fading states that happens when the player hits him, when he dies, and the fading state is like his body disappearing. So this is the basic behavior of the enemy. It's done with these finite state machines, and for me that's new at coding. Some things when done in GameMaker doesn't actually feel like coding, but coding this enemy behavior is something that for me it actually feels like coding and programming. The thought process of thinking about how to translate the behavior you want for the enemy to different states and how to code these states, it actually feels like a programming task, a challenge, and it's very satisfying when you get a cool result.